Why doesn't the trolley problem have an obvious answer? The trolley problem is meant to explore different philosophies. Under a utilitarian perspective, you're correct. You net 4 lives saved by pulling the switch. But the problem is ethically congruent to the fat man problem, where you save 4 net people by shoving someone onto the track that will stop the runaway trolley. It's also congruent to the healthy stranger problem, where the same philosophy ends with you murdering a benign drifter for his organs. This leads to deeper discussions on the ethics of the problem. The trolley is supposed to be the shallow water to familiarize yourself with the problem before you go into more complicated scenarios. Ultimately, the goal is to examine your viewpoint for consistency and soundness. If you believe in pulling the lever to save 4 people total, but will not harvest organs from the stranger or push the fat man, then there is a limit to your utilitarianism. And that's a meaningful thing to examine. Because some people think allowing harm is fundamentally less bad than causing harm. This is why we don't, for example, randomly select healthy people to kill so we can transplant their organs. Trading 1 life for 5 isn't always obviously right. Because you are directly killing someone if you pull the lever. But if you don't, you are letting 5 people die. The appeal of letting 5 people die is that you have nothing to do with it, and you are just a bystander. The trolley problem is actually a series of problems, where the dilemma becomes more and more tricky, even though the math, 5-1, is the same. The fat man. You can push a fat man off a bridge overlooking the rails. He will fall to his death and or be killed by the oncoming train. But he will slow down the train enough to save the 5 people. Do you push him? The unwilling organ donor. You're an organ transplant surgeon. In your waiting room are 5 people, all in dire need of 1 organ. One a liver, another a heart, and so on. A 6th person enters. A perfectly healthy person with healthy organs, who's come to pick up some paperwork for a friend. Do you kill this person, harvest his organs, and use those organs to save the other 5? The scenario isn't the trolley problem. The problem originated with Philippa Foot and got its name from Judith Thomson. Foot described this scenario, and then a second one. In the second one, you're a doctor in a hospital with 5 patients who will die if they can't get organ donations right away. A perfectly healthy patient comes in for a checkup. During the checkup, you realize they're a perfect genetic match for all 5 of the other patients. Should you kill the healthy patient and distribute her organs? Pretty much everyone thinks you should switch the trolley. Pretty much everyone thinks you shouldn't kill the patient. Both are cases of killing 1 person to save 5. The problem is to identify the difference between the cases that explains why it's sometimes okay to do this, and other times it isn't. Foot thought the explanation had to do with intent. Thomson gave other versions that showed problems with this solution, and gave others that she thought showed it was about whether people's rights were violated. Tons of other ethicists have chimed in with more and more versions and other possible explanations. The thought experiment is a useful tool, because it's easy to modify to see what changes our moral judgments and why, and thus to get a sense of what matters in ethics and what doesn't. There's no universally accepted solution to the trolley problem, although I personally find ones focusing on rights violations most promising. Because to some other people the answer is equally as obvious, but it's not the same one as yours. The rub is the difference between passively allowing 5 people to be killed and actively choosing to kill 1 person. See this clip. The trolley problem is more of a response to a specific moral philosophy which isn't very popular anymore. The idea that certain actions are inherently good or bad and that the circumstances involved don't excuse them. Basically, it's an argument against the idea that killing is always wrong. Therefore, if I flip the switch to kill one guy and save the 5 other people, that I am now a murderer. Most of us don't have that sort of moral code. But there are people who try to see the world in more black and white extremes, who might make that argument. And the trolley problem is meant as a way of saying that sort of ethical morality is flawed. It's easy to see if you rephrase it as, you are watching a trolley speeding towards 5 people from a bridge. Next to you is a large man also watching the incoming tragedy. Will you push the man from the bridge in order to derail the trolley and save the 5 people? The scenario is almost identical except for the direct versus indirect action. May I recommend watching the TV show The Good Place? That's all, folks. He's solved philosophy. My answer is I don't intervene. Someone else doesn't deserve to die just because circumstances and misfortune put 5 people's lives in danger. It's not my call to decide someone else has to die instead. There are 2 ways to address that. First, when you kill that one person, that makes you the killer. You are now responsible for that one person's death. If you do nothing, you didn't kill anyone. So, are you willing to personally kill someone instead of let 5 people die of their own accord? How about the legal implications? If you do nothing, you technically break no law. But if you switch the train, you commit murder. Does that make you reconsider the answer? Second, the trolley problem has a second part that most people don't know about. In the second part, you and a very fat person are standing on a bridge above the rail line. There are 5 people on the track with a train coming at them. You realize that if this fat person were to fall on the line, it would stop the train and save the 5 people. Do you throw this fat person off the bridge? In terms of final result, both situations are identical. You sacrifice one person to save 5. However, do you feel as comfortable throwing that fat person as you would simply by hitting the train switch? Many people might give you inconsistent answers. A part of the trolley problem is to address moral inconsistencies and how people rationalize them. You can philosophize about actively changing something, knowing that the result will be a death. Or you can save 5 people. It is an exercise in philosophy, not reality. Also because the answer changes depending on how it is phrased. Flicking a switch 1 less than 5. Having to do something awful to the 1 sometimes 15. Also it depends on how direct the effects are. I could easily save 5 people with the money I could get from selling my laptop. But I don't. On the other hand, if I saw someone drowning, I would jump into water to save them even if it broke my laptop. Because it's a question you can only give a subjective answer to. Assuming the goal is to choose the option that causes least suffering has least bad consequences on people's lives as a collective. Let's look at the situation. 1 death on side A versus 3 deaths on side B. Seems like a no-brainer. But these are people you don't know and people whose future impact on this world you don't know either. What if the one person on side A will cure cancer? What if a person on side B will be directly responsible for WW3? What if one of these people is a pedophile that regularly abuses his 6-year-old daughter? What if the pedophile is also the person who finds a cure for cancer? If your answer were truly and objectively right answer, it should remain the same and be right, regardless of who the person who dies is or what he would have done in the future had he survived. The point of the trolley dilemma is to demonstrate that sometimes there is no one answer. There isn't always an objectively correct response, so how, why, and where exactly do we draw the line? if we draw one? And sometimes we just have no way of knowing certain variables until after we made a choice. And how exactly do we cope with that fact? Hell. My answer to the trolley problem is usually either throwing myself under the trolley to stop it or speed it up as much as I can so by the time it hits the nearest bend it derails and hopefully nobody dies. I jump out of the trolley before it derails, just to mess with people and show that there is no one objectively right answer. It's usually discussed as a series of problems. Most people are fine with pulling a lever to kill one instead of 5 as it is clearly the least worst option and everything else is equal. But then problem 2 asks roughly the same thing in a hospital context. There are 5 patients that are going to die with a transplant. Each needs a different organ. Version 2. There is a random healthy guy who has come in for a checkup. He happens to have matching organs for all 5 of the other patients. Is it morally okay to kill him? Take his organs and save the other 5 people? Almost everyone strongly says no. But then the question is, what exactly makes this so different than the trolley problem? Version 2b is where the 6th patient is a registered organ donor and he has been shot in the head. We know he will almost certainly die eventually, but for the time being he is stable and surviving. Chances are his organs won't be available in time to save the others. Is it morally okay to speed up his death in order to save the other 5 patients? Many would say yes. But given there is some chance of recovery or the doctors could be wrong or corrupt, do we want this to become a rule for our society? Do you feel the same way when it's the fat person on the bridge scenario? Most people agree to switch tracks and it's kind of easy to reason because that one is also there from the evil person's fault. But pushing someone on the tracks to save them might feel different. If you would still push them, you are a utilitarian. Not an uncommon position, but it's very possible to disagree morally. We're hardwired to feel more guilty for the consequences of things we do than for the consequences of things we don't do. So not doing anything about the situation and letting 5 people die will make a person feel less guilty than throwing the switch and killing the one.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Haircast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.